Halloween is nigh, which means I'm in the mood to make some spooky Halloween cold process soap. I'm your bubble buddy Chris, and I've got an idea for something really spooky. For my soap design, I want to create a spooky graveyard. I'm thinking of a campy 90s are you afraid of the dark moment. So I'm going to make gravestones out of melt and pour soap that I'll carve and customize myself. For the actual soap, I'll do a very thin layer of dark green grass below the dirt, and as we go deeper, we reach the mystical realm of spirits, with a base of pitch black that's broken up by these rifts of blue and green spiritual energy. Those embeds would be placed upon a bed of coffee grounds that will make up the soil, as well as some sparkly autumnal glitter to resemble fallen leaves. With a long graveyard shift ahead of us, it's time to bring this plan to Earth. The first step is to make the melt and pour gravestones. I've got a brick of clear no sweat melt and pour base, so named because working with it is clearly no sweat. I'll admit that joke was pretty grave. I'll stop. A few chunks of that meltable soap goes into the microwave just until melted, and I'll prepare my workspace with some badly torn parchment paper. With my soap melted, I've got to convert it to gray matter by adding a tiddly bit of titanium dioxide and a bit tiddly of onyx black mica. Those two blended together should give me a pretty solid neutral gray tone. Blending it up, I accidentally frothed up the soap, and it actually gave me an idea. What if you blended soap like this until it's solidified? Like, would you get an Aero bar? If you don't know what that is, it's a little Canadian chocolate bar that's filled with bubbles. Anyways, now my plan is to pour a sheet of soap, let it solidify, and then cut out my gravestones as if it were cookie dough. But I poured the soap a little too warm and just watched as it rapidly spread. Any leftovers go into a little cupcake mold for a future project, and I wait for the soap to solidify. The soap is, much like the plot of Twilight, extremely thin.
How? I don't even know what you're saying. How?
My solution is to cut the sheet in half and press those two half sheets together to give it some y-axis. I then cut off all the ugly bits along the edges so I have a clean slate to carve from. My two sheets aren't really sticking together that well, so I decided to squish it with the weight of my body, using the parchment as a way to prevent my skin sticks from leaving weird finger-shaped indents in the soap. And on removing the parchment, it tore off some of that tiny foamy layer that I neglected to deal with earlier. Even though it was a complete accident, this effect looked really cool, and I decided to accidentally create more rips and tears to bear resemblance to old crumbling stone. To carve the gravestone, I'm just using a dotting stylus to outline the general shape, and then I'm going in with a not very sharp scalpel to cut it out. I found an image of Halloween gravestone decorations that I'm using as inspiration because I'm not creative enough to estimate what a gravestone looks like. Every gravestone needs an owner and their date of departure. Skip ahead to the next chapter if you don't like spoilers, because I'm about to discuss the deaths of some beloved fictional characters. With our first grave, we commemorate the joyous, carefree life of Jack Dawson, who perished at the age of 20 on Titanic's maiden voyage, slain by a door that we can clearly see wasn't buoyant enough. Dearest me, our second grave honors the joyous, carefree, very short life of Leslie Burke, also known as the Gum Girl from Willy Wonka. At the unripe age of 10, Leslie's watery demise proved to Chris that, well, boys actually do cry. We can just ignore that ugly 7 on the end of the gravestone there. Grave number 3 honors the not very joyous, definitely not carefree life of the nameless green-skinned dame identified by a cardinal coordinate. The Wicked Witch of the West tallies our third watery demise today, proving that death by water is an easy plot device. With every witch there's a wizard, and our final soul embodied more than one form, but left a body behind to rot, with the most enviable final utterance.
Plummet, you fools!
Gandalf the Grey took his last blow at the ripe age of maybe 55,000 years? I mean, seriously, he was ready to go. And so concludes our celebration of life. May those imaginary people rest in paper. Let's go make soap. I'm going to prepare 4 colors today. First, I'll start dividing some titanium dioxide, which will go into those ghostly green and blue colors, just a 1/4 teaspoon each. Poseidon blue mica will make up the blue at a 1/4 teaspoon, and an equal quantity of margarita mica will make up the green. Jungle green will embody the grassy layer with a 1/4 teaspoon of that, and then an 1/8 teaspoon onyx mica will join that jungle green to darken it down a bit. Lastly, a full teaspoon of onyx will make up that deathly black. If you ever wonder how I decide the quantity of mica to use, I base it on the weight of the soap that I'm coloring. So I'll take the weight of the soap in grams, divide it by 255, and the quotient becomes the amount of teaspoons I use. I prefer bold, saturated color, and that number is usually the max amount of colorant I'll add. Those colors all get their fair share of oil potion, and then I blendify until they're all nice and homogeneous. Time for the mad science. I'm using a little sieve for my lye water because if you watched my last soap video, well, you know. If not, I'll link it up above for your viewing pleasure. I want to keep the batter pretty thin, so I'm only gonna blend for a few seconds. It's better to underblend a bit than to overblend because once you've taken it too far, you can't bring it back. I actually wonder if there's a way to thin out batter again once it's gotten thick, so maybe I'll experiment with that in a future video. I need to divide my batter into its colors, so I'm pouring 130 grams of batter into one container and another 130 grams into another container, and those two containers will make up the ghostly green and blue. Next, 50 grams of batter goes into my little cupcake liner so it can wait for the grass to grow. Despite my efforts to keep the batter thin, it's thickening pretty quickly, and I haven't even added the fragrance yet. Speaking of which, I'm using 3 fragrances today: Mad Moon and Crisp Apple by Voyageur, and Dirt by Crafter's Choice. I'm only gonna add Mad Moon to the black portion of the soap, 12 grams of that, because it's high in vanillin, which will cause the soap to discolor. I'm also gonna add 6 grams of Crisp Apple, which seems a bit redundant since Mad Moon is apple. Mad Moon smells like a warm, cozy autumn harvest. It's a rich, spiced apple and pear fragrance that has my permission to live in my nostrils forever. In my original bowl is where I gloop the cauldron of liquid darkness so that portion becomes the color of a smoker's lungs. Don't look it up. I've made plenty of black soaps, and while the color is potent, I've never found them to stain. But if you're finding staining to be an issue, try using activated charcoal instead. I've never used it before, but I've heard it can make a pretty good black in soap, and it doesn't stain as much. My ghostly colors will get 5 grams each of Crisp Apple, which doesn't contain any vanillin, so the soap shouldn't discolor brown. Ectoplasm Green and Ectoplasm Blue get drizzled in, and I bubble, toil, and trouble. I'm gonna drop swirl the pot swirl and then move along because my batter is thickening quickly. I have a 1/4 batch mold prepared, and I'll dump a bit of my black first so the bottom is covered. I'll drop swirl my ectoplasm, whose texture is just on the cusp of being refrigerated Alfredo sauce. My drop shapes will be less teardrop and more smushed pancake, but that's fine by me because I like pancakes. I repeat that process, layering the black with the drops of ectoplasm, sandwiching the spiritual with the physical. I underestimated how much black soap I should have gone with because the top of my soap is an ectoplasm party that I wasn't invited to. Next, I've got to seal that realm with grass, so I'm adding 3 grams of dirt fragrance and then my grassy color. When I poured the green, there was so little of it, and I thought, oh my god, I thought I made more than this. And then I realized I was pouring the leftover black. So, you can witness firsthand that when I'm doing something stressful, I have the IQ of a walnut. Once I add my real green, I blendify ever so delicately because these silicone molds are flimsy and prone to spilling. When I first made the green color, I thought it was a bit too dark, but now that it's in the soap, I actually really like how brooding it is. I layer that grass on top extremely gently so as not to pierce the ectoplasm. Never mind. And then lightly flatten it so the grass is nice and even. I sprinkle some freshly ground coffee on top to resemble the mounds of dirt of freshly dug ground typically seen at a gravesite. I then use some fall vibes biodegradable glitter from the Good Glitter that I'd like to pretend are fallen leaves on the ground because in a crooked little town they were lost and never found. At last, I place those lovely headstones one by one. And with that, this little graveyard is ready for an eternal slumber during which I'll slice and dice. The next evening, the soap looks exactly the same, which is an unexpected but welcome gift. Normally something has gone wrong by this point. I made sure the coffee grounds were damp before I put the soap away, so they're actually pretty stuck to the soap, which is exactly what I wanted. Let's cut away and see what a slice of the afterlife looks like. This soap turned out pretty much exactly how I imagined in my head. Those melt and pour gravestones just fit so well with that bit of coffee dirt, and that sparkly autumnal glitter just pulls it all together. Whether it's leaves or dirt specks or, I don't know, coins that the grave robber left behind. The bar itself was also a win for me. The black is richly dark, and that drop swirl pot swirl of ghostly green and blue made some pretty interesting otherworldly shapes. The fragrance is also powerful and ethereal. It really smells like homemade apple cider, and with that slight hint of musty dirt, it just feels like you're outside enjoying your annual autumn festival. Or your local graveyard, whatever suits your fancy. I called this soap the Haunted Graveyard. I was originally going to call it the 7th Foot, but that seemed unnecessarily cannibalistic and weird to me. So I went with a more obvious, less creepy name. The Haunted Graveyard is an ode to my time trick-or-treating as a kid in the suburbs, where I experienced firsthand the lengths some crazy people go in decking out their yards for Halloween. Jumping spiders, gravestones, inflatables, fog machines, and then they have the nerve to give you chiclets. What a disgraceful excuse for candy. With this soap, my goal was to get a sneak peek of the dimension of ghosts, and I can say with confidence that it was right here on Earth all along. They're all hiding in your closets, waiting to come out at 12 a.m. because you forgot to forward that email to 3 friends 18 years ago. Good night. That was a soap journey with Soap Universe. Thank you for watching. Bubble bye.